S'mores Canyon, aka Frye Creek Canyon near Thatcher, Arizona has been on our canyoneering to-do list for a while now. To get there, you're going to have to travel on some fairly bumpy dirt roads, so vehicles with high clearance are definitely recommended. Once you reach the Frye Mesa Reservoir, you have made it to your destination. You can either park up at the top like we did or down at the water's edge. You're gonna have to walk up that hill one way or another. After rubbing or spanking my lucky canyon troll, it was time to gear up and get on the way. This entire canyon is 2.6 miles long with 800 feet of elevation gain and should take between 4 and 6 hours to complete. You can also park here or even up at the gate if you have a really off-road capable vehicle, but remember, you're gonna have to climb uphill at some point. As we reached the gate, we looked off to our left and got our first look at some of the waterfalls that we would soon be rappelling down. V was slightly injured that day, so I offered to carry her bags on the way up in hopes that the Tylenol would kick in and she would be able to complete the entire canyon with us. The 2-lane dirt road eventually gives way to a much smaller and more rugged trail, but as far as canyoneering approaches, this is pretty simple. One cool thing about S'mores Canyon is that it's not just your standard canyon with just a bunch of rappelling. Here you'll also be encountering a rope traverse and a bunch of granite water slides. Because of this, it is extremely important that you check the flow of the water through the canyon. It's generally thought that somewhere around 1 CFS or cubic foot per second will provide you with a good and fun day. However, if it reaches 1.5 CFS or beyond, this canyon should only be attempted by people who are very comfortable in Class C environments. We had reached the beginning of the technical section, the temperatures were rising and the water felt really nice and refreshing at this point. We might disagree with that a little bit later, but we were really enjoying it in the moment. This tree is not the anchor for Rappel 1, but in times of high flow you can use it so that you can safely access it. As you can see, accessing the first anchor can be a little bit tricky. It's on a steep and slippery granite slope. You can also use the rope attached to the tree as a hand line so you can safely get on the rope of Rappel 1. If you're measuring from the pothole, Rappel 1 is right around 30 feet and quite straightforward. It can be pretty slippery, but so can everything else in this canyon. The good thing is that if you're not feeling extremely sure-footed, you can always just slide down most of the rappels here. Here we have a pretty good look at Rappel 1 from the bottom. As you can see, it's pretty smooth except for the last couple of feet that drop off. Some of our group elected to stay off to the left and avoid the water completely, and this is a much smoother route. This brings us to rappel number 2, which is pretty much back to back with Rappel 1. This one is definitely more technical and it's also about 10 feet higher, coming in at right around 40 feet. You can go around the water on this one as well, but you're gonna have to work a lot harder to do it. Rappels 1 and 2 are a great introduction to this canyon and a small glimpse into what you have coming. As the last couple members of our group came down, we made our way down the small water slide that led us to rappel number 3. The anchor on this one is a little bit sketchy to get to, and you definitely don't want to fall over the side. This is a 2-stage rappel with an overall height of right around 80 feet. The tricky thing is that you need to send someone in your group down the first stage so that they can swim across a fairly deep pool to make sure that the rope is long enough to get over the second stage of this rappel. It is also pretty slippery to get up onto the ledge in between the 2 stages, so I ended up hanging out there to help people get from one to the other. We also ended up using a safety rope up at the top just to make sure that everyone could get on rope safely. This one was definitely a little bit more challenging. Even though there was plenty of dry rock to rappel down, it was polished to almost what felt like a mirror finish. Our La Sportiva shoes have always given us tons of traction, but in this canyon it felt like they had met their match. As we made our way to the bottom of the second stage, we came face to face with one of the bigger rappels in this canyon, which is Rappel 4. This one comes in at right around 70 feet, and it might not be a bad idea to zipline your pack down before you come down this one. You will be getting absolutely blasted by water here, and if you've never experienced that before, it's pretty eye-opening. The reason you might want to send your backpack down first is because the water can hit it and flip you upside down, which can be quite scary. This actually ended up happening to our buddy Jessica, and it was pretty intense for a second, but luckily she is a tough cookie. After Rappel 4, you're going to get a small break in the action. After making your way through some trees, you're going to come to a series of water slides. We ended up running a rope on this one just because it's pretty tall, steep, and sketchy. And it also has a bit of a curve which might bang your head into the rock on the right side on the way down. After the sketchy one, you'll come to a series of completely optional but fun small water slides. It's pretty funny how a couple of water slides can turn a bunch of canyoneers into little kids on a playground. After playing around for a little bit, we realized that we still had quite a bit of canyon ahead of us, and we got back to it. As we made our way further down the canyon, we came to a fixed rope traverse. This is located high up on the left side of the canyon. We highly recommend using your tethers to hook into the rope because, as with everything else in this canyon, it is slippery. At the end of the traverse, there is a piece of rebar nailed into the rock where you can either set up a rappel or you can work your way all the way to the end of the rock and just climb down. There's also an option to do a water slide down a 2-stage 50-foot waterfall if you're feeling crazy. If you are not having a fantastic time in the canyon at this point, you should be able to find a bailout trail on the left side. This will take you up a hill and back to the car. We, however, were having a great time, so we continued on. There is a pretty good break in the action here, and you can expect to be walking down this creek for between 30 to 60 minutes. It's not a boring walk though, and over the course of it, you will encounter more water slides. Please note that the second half of this canyon does not get a lot of direct sunlight, so it can get very cold down here. We're definitely speaking for experience because, as you'll see in a bit, there was a little bit of suffering towards the end. After the narrow canyon, you'll have a bit more of walking through a dense forest before you get to what is probably one of the most exciting water slides of this canyon. This slide is long, steep, bumpy, and has a small cliff at the end. But luckily there was this hand line that we were able to use to make sure we weren't going so fast that we flew off the end. Even with the rope, you're probably still in for a pretty exciting ride. Be sure to hold on pretty good to the rope because it doesn't reach all the way down to the bottom, so you need to grab onto it at the very end just to make sure you don't go flying over the edge. I didn't know if V was going to be able to get stopped in time, but luckily she did. From there you are on to your last little forest walk of this canyon. It's nowhere near as long as some of the walking sections before, but there are some areas where it gets a little bit tight. It was at this point where we realized that the sun was starting to get a little bit low in the sky. The water was definitely not getting any warmer, and now the temperatures were starting to drop as well. We knew we needed to pick up the pace as we reached Rappel 5. This is another fairly simple 2-stager that's only about 25 feet tall. You can avoid a fair amount of the water if you stick to the left side. As we finished up Rappel number 5, we came to what was probably my least favorite part of S'mores Canyon, and it is the water slide that we're coming up to right here. The slide itself isn't that bad, but it tightens up at the very end and you get wedged into it. And I must say, it didn't feel too great coming to a sudden stop like that. Rappel number 6 is another simple 20-footer with the bolt being located on the right side of the canyon. From here on out, things are going to be pretty rapid fire, with one rappel leading right into the next one. Rappel 7 is another 20-footer, but it's a lot more technical as it has you dropping down into this cove. The canyon really starts to tighten up, and staying dry at this point is no longer an option. With rappel 7 in the rear view mirror, we now move on to rappel 8, which has an interesting little sequence to it. To start it off, you need to stem your way across and land on a small chalk stone. This is a 2-stage rappel with a pool in the middle, kind of like rappel 3. This one made me a little bit nervous because I wanted to make sure that V made it across the pool okay, but there was nowhere for me to wait for her, so I had to go down to the bottom of this second stage. The flow on both stages was pretty heavy, so you definitely need to bring your A game on this one. We were now freezing and wishing we brought thicker wetsuits as we were dropped directly into rappel number 9. This one is right around 50 feet and starts off as a water slide but quickly transitions into an overhang. If it's getting cold for you like it was for us, you're going to want to send one of your strong members down first so that they could swim across the pool and start rigging the last rappel. This is a good idea because everyone has to wait in freezing shoulder to chest deep water to go down the last 50-foot rappel. Even the GoPro stabilization couldn't smooth out the shivering of whoever was holding the camera at this point. We were so happy to be done, and all we had left was a simple walk around the left side of the reservoir to get back to the car. And now for a little disclaimer. Canyoneering is epic and fun, but it can also be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. If you would like to try canyoneering for yourself, be sure to either take a class or at least go with someone who is experienced. And that is going to do it for our run through S'mores Canyon. If you enjoy canyoneering videos, be sure to subscribe because we have plenty more coming up. And if you could also hit that thumbs up button, that would really help us out. You can find out more information about S'mores Canyon on our website, thatadventurelife.com.